Our final speaker, and this was a pretty big challenge, but I knew exactly who could fill these shoes, to talk about how we all stand on the shoulders of generations. And here today, in a intergenerational pair, to give some final thoughts on our legacy and what we stand for and values and the future are John McCarthy and Brian Lutz. Let me introduce them briefly. John McCarthy is the Executive Director of the Gulf Coast Heritage Association and Historic Spanish Point. John is a native Floridian and has lived in Sarasota for most of his life. He attended Pineview High School and received his BS from Goshen College in Indiana. Prior to joining the team at Historic Spanish Point, John was employed as the Executive Director of Scope. In 2012, John retired after working 33 years from Sarasota County government, having served as environmental specialist, county historian, and director of Parks and Recreation. John has served as president of the Historical Society of Sarasota County for 2 terms and served as president of the Florida Recreation and Parks Association Foundation. He is a frequent conference presenter and provides numerous local history lectures, educational programs, and tours. His articles in Sarasota Magazine entice readers to explore nature and local heritage. With him today is a new friend, Brian Lutz. Brian is also a Florida native, was also born here in Sarasota. He graduated from Venice High School and earned an associate's degree from State College of Florida. He is currently enrolled full-time at Florida International University, where he's completing a BA in Sustainability and Environment. And he also works full-time as a park ranger at Oscar Scheer State Park. Thank you, Tony, for the introduction, and I hope that this buds into a very successful mentorship. Please, give us your closing words.
Thank you, Ms. Jennifer. Everyone, thanks everyone for being here, and Jennifer particularly, thank you for inviting us to speak together and for introducing us, because I never met Brian before about a week ago, and we wanted to prepare for today jointly and present jointly, and so we got together and kind of introduced each other to one another, and we found that there was some commonality in our backgrounds and some commonality in how we became interested in nature and how it inspired us and how we were inspired by others, and then going on to careers at different places. Brian's a little bit younger than I am. He's just kind of starting his career with the Florida Park Service, and me, I'm after a couple of decades trying to figure out how to make the best use of myself here in Sarasota. We came up with a couple mathematical equations. That's basically the title of our presentation, and the subtitle kind of goes along with everything that you've been talking about here today. And I think that we'll go ahead and get started today telling you all the stories that we told each other, and then kind of came to this aha moment that our lives were fairly similar. I grew up surrounded by nature in a little island in Southwest Florida, and for the first 7 years of my life, all I knew was the beach on the one side and the mangroves and the back bay on the other. Talk about horseshoe crabs. We used to go down to the Gulf of Mexico, and they'd just be as thick as you could imagine, just as far as you could see, breeding and mating and whatever they were doing out there. And then we didn't watch TV at night. We'd go down to the back bay at the south end of the island and watch all the roseate spoonbills. It's kind of like a double sunset, pink in the sky and just pink. People see a roseate spoonbill today, they think it's a big deal to say one. I mean, back in the 1960s here, we'd see hundreds of them. This photo on the left is me actually studying the wave energy along the Gulf Coast of Florida. Very scientific study there. You can see I built up big legs trying to steady myself in the surf. The second photograph, I'm actually testing the soil compaction and the downshore drift of a shore perpendicular rock revetment on the same beach. And then you'll notice on the third photo, I'm mimicking the nesting behavior of a female loggerhead sea turtle. I don't have any photographs of me inside. I got plenty of photos outside. But one of the things that was pretty cool, my folks didn't have a lot of money, but my mom bought a World Book Encyclopedia collection for me, one book at a time every month. And every month it would arrive in the mail, and I would devour that thing. And that was pretty cool in terms of helping me understand some things. But we moved to Sarasota into the urban setting. The beach for us was gone. The bay was gone. We're living in downtown Sarasota. And I didn't really get reconnected to nature until I was in high school at Pineview. This is old campus. basically a little pine grove on Alta Vista Street with a bunch of little cubicles. And a guy over there to the right, Solomon Malinsky, who was our biology teacher, and he took us out to South Lido, into the mangroves and seining on the seagrass beds and out into woods, and we would salvage plants from these places, these little empty lots that were going to become houses. And Malinsky really kind of put me on a course to success, but he certainly wasn't the only mentor. Dr. Mary Jelks, who just passed away here recently, spent as much time at her house as I did at my own growing up here in Sarasota. As soon as I got out of high school, I joined the Youth Conservation Corps. My mentor there was Bill Crowley, multi-generational Sarasotan, a guy who knew how to take care of the land. And he was always telling me about his mentor, Jasper Crowley, the guy who donated the land to what's now Crowley Museum and Nature Center. I don't know what happened, but 30 years later, I find myself having had a career in protecting cultural resources, natural resources, and recreational resources in the county. And that's kind of my story. Inspired by nature, the nature that surrounded me, inspired and kind of catalyzed by a mentor who cared about me.
My growing ups were very much the same. I was immersed in nature through my grandparents and through Scouts, which eventually led to me becoming an Eagle Scout. My father was really one of my main mentors, and he gave me that my passion and my drive to work hard. And through me camping at Myakka River State Forest and camping at a place called Dog Island right off of Gasparilla as you're going into Boca Grande, there's an island right there to the left. We used to load the canoes all up in there and go out there for the weekend and just have a blast. But really, what my desire or my passion for the environment came from plants. An interest in botany, which led me to social media, actually, for positive results. It's not that doom and gloom. Led me to this plant group, which then again fueled that passion for botany and passion for fire, which you can see there on the right side there. That was actually my first prescribed burn out at Oscar Shear.
Brian actually gave up a prescribed burn to come and meet with me in my office. I thought that was pretty cool. As part of our conversation and knowing what kind of the topic was this afternoon, I shared with Brian a couple of things that I've been doing the last couple of years, going around the state of Florida on behalf of the Florida Recreation and Parks Association and describing the value of parks and nature and outdoor activities in new language that I learned at SCOPE, a community engagement organization here in Sarasota, community data and community engagement. And one of the things I shared with Brian was that there are all these domains of well-being in terms of how a community is judged in terms of its well-being. And there are none of those that are not impacted by nature or parks or science or the work that we do. Brian ran home and created this graphic that I would never have the technological ability to do, and embodied images from all those different domains of well-being that we had talked about that day. So then we got to thinking, well, let's explore those a little bit, because there's a lot of ways to engage around these different things, and so let's talk about it.
So the first domain that we're going to talk about is education. And one of the things that I want to touch through my aspect or my realization of it is this concept of habituation. And that, you know, an example can be a fan in the background where the noise becomes constant and it kind of just filters into the background. And if we immerse ourselves into nature, it's going to become easier for us to understand the ecological factors of nature. And the ultimate goal of environmental education is to create this wow experience that connects with them for a lifetime. And these impacts are going to influence not only the values, but they're going to influence their ethics, they're going to influence their decision making, the relationship, and not only the relationships, but it's going to affect them on a personal level and on a community level.
And Karen talked about how these young people are going to grow up and be voters and be active in the community, and they're going to be our future. And so it's just so important that we engage with them. And I'll never forget going out with inner city outings and having to describe to this young man at the Carlton Reserve that wood comes from trees. I had to show him the end grain on the boards on the picnic table and then take him to a stump, because he had no idea that wood came from trees. We're living in a nature and a science-based economy here in Sarasota, and at its fundamental roots, it's always been that way. At historic Spanish Point in the 1870s was built the first tourist hotel in Sarasota because there were so many scientists coming here from the Smithsonian and the Wagner Free Institute of Science in Philadelphia. They needed a place to stay. Now we've got things like kayak tours that we're becoming quite famous for. Then we discovered that through a stormwater project, we have the celery fields and Audubon, and right out there on Interstate 75, not Disney World, not something fake, but something real that people can go and enjoy. And of course, Moat Marine Lab from a science standpoint, Selby Gardens, Maurice Selby Gardens, all these different science things that are employing people, bringing money, value-added money into the community. It's not just money that's turning over here. When Moat or Selby goes out and gets a grant, that's dollars coming in, spent here locally. When people come to visit for eco-recreation and learning about nature, those are value-added dollars coming into the community. And so these are some of the most powerful tools in our local economy. And so if we want to engage the business community, we probably aren't going to talk about pollinators so much as we're going to talk about the dollars coming in the door. And so we use these different things because everybody has something else on their mind, but everyone needs to be concerned about the world in which we live because there's only one to be concerned about.
So another one of those domains is just the environment itself and the value that the land itself has. In Sarasota County, there's 1/3 of the land has been saved, and because of that, our air and our water quality are excellent. It's almost second nature. We don't even think about it. And I want to touch on the Carlton Reserve, and that place for me is one of my favorite places to go to. And getting to connect with John, I got to see or hear that he helped make that place what it is. And not only that, I get to go out there and I get to do the same thing. And maybe in the future I can make that place what he made it to me, I can make that happen to somebody else. And not only that, but the Carlton doesn't just protect the air and the water quality, but it also gives us access to water. There's a water treatment plant out there that probably many people don't know about that actually give us access to water, which enables people to come here and live and appreciate the land for what it is.
Sarasota's environmental legacy goes back years and years. One idea that I had for this presentation today was to show you more old articles about people as early as the 1890s and 1910 lamenting the loss of habitat, wildlife, fisheries, sea turtles, and all those things. But everything from, referendum for mandatory recycling to referendum for environmental lands, neighborhood parklands, and all these other initiatives are something that's really a part of our environmental legacy in Sarasota. And so when we think about our community, we should share this with other people, that we're not just about tourism, we're not just about home building, we're really about the environment. From a personal health standpoint, there's nothing better than getting outdoors. There's actually doctors now that are writing prescriptions for you to go outdoors and do things. I mean, my gosh, can you imagine? The air quality outdoors is typically much better than it is indoors. The sunshine, hey, maybe you need some protection from the sun, but it's good to get out there. There's all sorts of ways to do it, everything from riding your bike on the Legacy Trail to fitness stations to canoeing. I mean, it's kind of cool. We found this little photograph online, Pine Brook Park, nature and fitness trail. So nature and fitness go together hand in hand. Whoever created the sign knew that. But there's just so many ways. And if people just get outside and move around, their health is going to be improved. And so when we talk to people, we've got almost a medical economy now where all these baby boomers are getting older. And one way that they can stay vital is to be outdoors and being active and maintaining their health.
So another domain that we wanted to touch on is the civic engagement part. And what I want to talk about in civic engagement is the fact that it just helps bring the youth, not only youth, but adults as well, together. And this promotion of positive youth development creates this atmosphere of trust. And when you create that trust, you can create a way to share ideas. And when you're sharing ideas, you're going to start to inspire people. And one of those great community involvement things is John Thaxton and his Christmas bird count. Getting that Christmas bird counts have been happening since the 1900s, and I think ours has been happening since 1985. And in 2013, they counted over 150 birds. And getting all these volunteers, which is the big thing there, is your involvement in the community. At Oscar Scheer State Park, last year alone, We documented 33,000 community service hours. Not only that, but we have almost 500,000, as a whole, 500,000 community service hours together. And it's just that getting out there and inspiring, making that inspiring moment.
And I think sometimes the biggest barrier to people just getting in nature is just to do it. You know, when I lead a kayak trip, I always tell them when we get to the water's edge, we've overcome the barrier. Now we've reached our destination. When you're going for a hike in the woods, the biggest barrier is just to get there. The biggest barrier for these children, especially earlier we were talking about minority children, underprivileged children, they need a little extra effort just to get them beyond the barrier so that they can enjoy nature. If you're living in an urban setting, you don't have so much access to it. If you're living in a rural setting, it might surround you. But I personally have felt the difference between being surrounded by nature at the age of 7 and being surrounded by buildings at the age of 8, and then having to actually get back in it. This top photo on the left is what? People wearing a similar colored t-shirt at a Board of County Commissioner meeting to assert their desire to see something happen. This happens to be Friends of the Legacy Trail. On the one hand, it's a recreational trail. On the other hand, it drives through nature. You see gopher tortoises, otters, you see snakes across the trail. And I can't tell you how many people that go out there on that Legacy Trail thinking that they're going out for exercise or thinking that they're just going out to check it out are exposed to nature and they don't even realize it. And then as far as engagement goes, this photograph here, if you don't know this gentleman, the lower left, Euleen Myrick used community engagement to build a park in Newtown where there was no park. And he felt that that was vital to that community, and he worked on it, and he worked at it until Lime Lake Park became a reality. Mobility is one of the domains of well-being that really judges how a community is doing. And this is both about moving people around as well as not having to move people around so much. So for instance, if you had a park or a preserved or a vacant lot or some form of nature within a very close proximity to your house, you're going to be healthier, wealthier, wiser, more in tune with nature. Here in Sarasota, we've got things like Legacy Trail. We've got things like ADA accessibility to try to make it possible for everyone to just get outdoors and get in nature. And if people are afraid of bugs and they're afraid of snakes, then that has to be overcome. I remember working at the Carlton, people were afraid of the prescribed burns. Then we started doing these post-prescribed burn walking tours. And then they were amazed to see how that Pine Flatwoods, how that area changed from those. And so getting people out, if the trail's the excuse, great. If a hike is the excuse, great. But then also remembering that we don't have to consume so much gasoline if there's a park or a preserve or a little bit of green space in every corner. So folks, you've spent 2 days talking about the challenges that lie ahead and some of the tools that can be put to work to overcome those challenges, because it's so very important to our lives that we protect nature, that we engage science, that we use science to convince those who can't be convinced that nature is really what rules our lives and that we have to work within it. We've all, I'm sure, got ideas of some action that we want to take. That's what engagement is all about, is getting together and partnering so that you can take action. We have a tremendous environmental legacy in Sarasota and Manatee counties that needs to be continued. We're up against tremendous growth and development. I think the latest number was 1,000 people move to Florida every day. And so we've got to address all that. And of course, we know it will not be easy. The odds are against us, as they are for the little sea turtle. But we know that we can make it. We know that we can do it if we all work together, engage with one another, and which brings us back to Brian and I have started a new partnership. We're 30 years apart in age. He's at the beginning of his career. I'm at some sort of a funky working sunset. But what can we learn from each other? This is not a one-way street. This isn't a one-way street. This isn't me just telling Brian about my successes and failures. This is about me listening to what Brian is experiencing out in the woods every day and what he's up to and what ideas he says. So we're really looking forward to see where our new partnerships will take us, and we're looking forward to see where your new partnerships are going to take you. We believe that from a youth standpoint, nature plus a mentor equals the passion that kept me going for 33 years in Sarasota County government, the passion that fuels Brian to get up in the morning every day, the passion that brings all of you here today is because you were surrounded in some way or embraced by nature, and you had some mentor or multiple mentors that helped you to get to where you are. And then just to kind of wrap up that last conversation and set of lightning rounds that we had here, we came up with another mathematical equation, which is engagement times the passion of all of you will result in the action that we need to do the right thing for our planet, our state, our community, and our backyard. So thank you very much.
Thank you.